Hello, my name's Diane Webster. I'm the Research Director for the Prader-Willi Research Foundation Australia. And joining me today is Theresa Strong.
Hey, Diane, it's great to see you. I'm Theresa Strong. I'm Director of Research Programs at the Foundation for Prader-Willi Research in the US. And I'm also a mom to a young man with PWS.
Thank you, Theresa, and welcome. Now, we're going to be having a conversation based on some family questions, a bit of a Q&A about clinical trials, in particular international clinical trials. So before we start, we want to just declare that what we're talking about today is our understanding and our thoughts of these clinical trials and where they're at, but we in no way represent these companies. So we don't have particular inside information. This is just what we're aware of and various public disclosures. So with that, let's launch straight in. So a big thank you to our families who have sent us the questions that we're going to talk through today. We don't have a lot of time, so if you want more information, feel free to reach out at the end. Our first question is, how long will it take for DCCR to be available for our kids? So there's a couple of parts to that question. I'm going to let Theresa start with an update, and then I'll add a bit of an Australian perspective. Theresa.
Great. So this is diazoxide extended release, DCCR, and it is being looked at by Soleno Therapeutics, and they have done a large phase 3 clinical trial, international clinical trial. For those of you who have been here for a little while, you may recall that that clinical trial essentially gave very good results, but was complicated by COVID. And the post-COVID results were a little bit murkier, which I guess is not really unexpected, given that the outcome assessments were centered around behaviors. And with COVID, there was a huge changes in environment and, behaviors changed for a lot of the participants. So the FDA encouraged Soleno to do some more studies just to be sure that the positive effects that they were seeing really were positive. And so Soleno has now done what's called a randomized withdrawal study, where they randomly took the drug, put some people on placebo for a period of time to see if there was a change in hyperphagia and the other behaviors that had improved before. So that part of the study has been, enrollment is complete, and it's nearing completion. It will take a while after that. So Soleno will need to analyze that data, and then they'll need to have discussions with the FDA. And if that data, along with some of the other data that they have, they're comparing, for example, the participants to the natural history study that is being done through the Global PWS Registry. If all of that data looks great, then they'll submit a new drug application to the FDA. The FDA will take about 6 months to review, and then there'll be approval. If they agree that it's safe and effective, there'll be approval in the US. And then, Diane, I'm not familiar with the Australian process, so maybe you can fill families in on that.
Yeah, thank you. So the first point to make, I think, is that once a drug is approved as safe and effective in the US, it doesn't automatically become available in Australia. So we are a different country, therefore we have to work through our approval processes as well. Unfortunately, that usually happens after it's been approved in the US, as opposed to happening at the same time. So the process for us is the Soleno would then need to submit an application to our TGA, the Therapeutic Goods Administration. They will check all the safety and efficacy data and register the drug in Australia. After that, it goes through various committees and health technology reviews in order to get listed for reimbursement or as part of the PBS scheme. And that's the really critical phase, because that's what brings the cost of the drug down and makes it affordable and accessible to families. So it's a bit of a stepwise process, and those clinical trials under the withdrawal studies happening at the moment are the first step. So our next question, which I guess relates to that, is how close is a treatment for hyperphagia? So if I kick off with that one, I'm really excited about this space. I think we are closer than we ever have been before. think there's a lot of really interesting science that is coming out, not even year on year, it's coming out month on month, that is really expanding our understanding of what's driving hyperphagia. And what that then pushes through to is an increased number of clinical trials. I think maybe, Theresa, a lot of these trials are happening in the US. Would you perhaps like to speak about some of the trials that are targeting hyperphagia at the moment?
Yeah, there's quite a few trials. I mean, we've mentioned Soleno Therapeutics and the DCCR trials already. Families may also be familiar with the drug carbetocin, which was trialed by Levo Therapeutics. That trial showed encouraging results. The FDA wasn't completely convinced and wanted more data. And now Acadia Pharmaceuticals is going to be testing that drug in an additional phase 3 study. It's likely to be international. They haven't announced sites yet, though. So that's, a drug, again, that showed some promise in one trial already. So we're looking forward to seeing the follow-up study on that. And then there are a number of new drugs, as you mentioned, Diane. The nice thing is that they're using many different mechanisms to potentially address hyperphagia in PWS. Aardvark Therapeutics is trying a drug that works on a certain type of receptor in the stomach that reduces hunger in some settings and hopefully in PWS. Neuron Pharmaceuticals, which is an Australian company, is going to be doing a study not more on development than hyperphagia is my understanding, but that should be a really interesting study. Gideon Richter has a drug that looks at the MCH pathway, which is a different pathway that's important in hunger and other behaviors in potentially in PWS. So that's a study that's underway. FPWR is going to be doing a study using a device rather than a drug, which stimulates the vagus nerve, and it's more for behavior. It's not really for hyperphagia. So those, and then Harmony Biosciences, of course, has a drug pitolisant that they're looking at for excessive daytime sleepiness in PWS, which can impact many things, including behavior and ability to learn and things like that. So I think overall, it is an extremely active clinical trial space. There are many difficulties that we see in PWS, hyperphagia being one of them, behavioral problems being another, daytime sleepiness being another. And these drugs alone and in combination are really addressing some of these most difficult problems. So very exciting times.
It is, isn't it? And that point you raised, that the overlap between hyperphagia and the behavioural challenges, I think it's going to be really interesting to see as we move forward how many of the treatments for hyperphagia also impact the various challenging behaviours that families are living with as well. So it'll be an interesting space to watch.
Yes, for sure. I think we haven't teased out yet, if you were to reduce hyperphagia, would all the other behaviors come down? How tightly are they linked, or are they separate? And I think we'll get some answers to those questions as these studies go on.
I agree.
And I wonder, Diane, about, what sites or what drugs do you see coming to the Australian space? Because I think one of the things that's clear to me is it is going to take a true international effort to really evaluate all of these potential therapeutics. And so we really need to be all working together to get these studies done.
I agree, especially the bigger phase 3 trials. That a phase 2 trial might only be recruiting 20 odd people with Prader-Willi syndrome. For some of these bigger trials, we're seeing numbers like 170. And that represents a real opportunity for us down here in Australia, where we can basically connect with these companies. We, at the foundation, we work really hard to connect early. So we look out for people doing phase 1 and phase 2 trials. We build those links because down here in Australia, we are English speaking. We have an excellent healthcare system. The government is very supportive in terms of tax incentives. There's a lot of really good reasons for these companies to come to Australia, but they need to know we're here. So we put a bit of effort into kind of going out and ringing doorbells, if you like, and just saying, hey, Australia's here. We've got 1,500 people with Prader-Willi syndrome. We've got excellent experienced physicians who are, willing to engage in these trials. So we've had some success. So the CARE PWS trial with Levo, they came down a few years ago. And we are working at the moment, actively working with a couple of different companies. So we can't at the moment disclose who, but we are hoping that we will have trial sites in the fairly near future for some of these larger international phase 3 trials. And that's exactly as you said, Theresa. It's about using our global network to get these trials done as quickly as we can. Because succeed, fail, or somewhere in the middle, every single trial is getting us closer to those therapies. So, yeah, and I think the other thing I would add there too, from an Australian perspective, is it's not just about the international trials that we can bring in, although they are obviously really exciting opportunities. You've heard through the afternoon from at least 6 different researchers who are running local trials as well. So not all trials are international. Some of them are homegrown, and it's good to support those ones as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which I think brings us to our next question, which is what can families do to help make research and treatments happen? So, yeah, Theresa,
yeah, the most obvious thing, obviously, is to quote Elizabeth Roof, who's a great researcher at Vanderbilt University, we need butts in seats. We need families, enrolling in a clinical trial is a personal decision. You want to talk to your doctor about it. You want to make sure it's the right trial for you. But really the only way that we are going to learn if these treatments are safe and effective in individuals with PWS is to do the studies, to get through the study. So I always ask families, it's your decision, whether you want to enroll, but please do at least learn about the trials. If there are trials that, your child is in the age group, pick up the phone, talk to the study coordinator, see what's involved, talk to your doctor and learn about that. There are many other ways that you can support the clinical trial enterprise, enrolling in a natural history study, participating in surveys that help define the unmet medical need. The needs of the community is really important. So pharmaceutical companies can understand PWS and understand the needs of the community. So, even without enrolling a clinical trial, there are still many things that you can do to be supportive of the enterprise. And, if you hear of a family that's in a clinical trial, please take a moment to thank them for, taking the time to enroll and participate in that trial. I'm sure you have some things you might want to add to that, Diane.
I would endorse that answer wholeheartedly. I think that getting involved. So if you are based down here in Australia, we do collate on our website all the trials that Australians are eligible to enrol in. Those trials aren't always running here. Sometimes they will be a survey-based trial or a remote intervention trial that's being run out of the US or the UK, or could be anywhere in the world. So there are resources available like the website where you can learn about those trials. And exactly as Theresa said, we need the right people in the right trials. So ask yourself, which is the right trial for you? Beyond clinical trials, I would also like to highlight that there are a number of other ways you can promote and be engaged in research. And I'm talking beyond fundraising here as well. We all know that research is expensive. That's covered elsewhere. But you can also engage with researchers in the early stages of research. So a focus group, for example, where they might have questions about what's important to you. When people are writing clinical trial protocols, they might ask questions like, is it okay if we use a sweetener in the oral formulation? So these are all ways that families can help shape research, and they're more important than you might think, because if you get a trial protocol right, then it's faster to recruit and you get your results quicker. So participating, knowing what's out there. If a trial's not for you, then consider the surveys, consider the focus groups. When we're trying to get drugs approved in Australia, sharing your story. What's important to you? What difference would this drug make if it was approved, or if it was not approved? What is the impact on your life? So progressing research is not just about funding, and it's not just about taking a drug in a clinical trial. It can also be things as simple as surveys and letter writing, and sharing those very personal moments of your life and the impact that it has as well. So, and I think I'll finish that with a thank you and an acknowledgement that you know, a lot of these things are very personal. So it's amazing the efforts that you are making to help us advance research and get towards those therapies. So Theresa, our last question for today, it's been phrased by a few different people in a few different ways, but I'm going with this version. Is there real hope for any of these treatments?
I would say a big yes. I think that, you know, I've been, my son now is 29, so I've, you know, been intimately involved in PWS for a long time now. And if I compare where we are today with even, you know, 5 or 10 years ago, it's just an amazingly different landscape. You know, there are drugs that are showing promise in clinical trials. I think, you know, 10 or 15 years ago, it wasn't even clear if anything could ever impact hyperphagia in PWS. And I think the trials that have come to date have really shown that there is hope for even more than one way to potentially reduce hyperphagia in PWS. So I think it is a very hopeful time. And I'm very excited to see what the next couple of years are going to bring.
I'm a scientist at heart, and I get super excited about what the future is going to bring here. I agree. I think there is much to be hopeful about. What really excites me when I look at what's happening now is the number of different ways we're approaching this this challenge. So it's not just hyperphagia, but I guess it's the analogy of you know, don't put all your eggs in one basket. We have a lot of baskets that are out there at the moment. And I think that for me drives real hope that one or more or a combination of these agents are going to have real life-changing impacts. So, yeah.
I mean, PWS is a hard problem, so it's going to take a lot, but I think there's, you know, reasons to be hopeful for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I think what remains is to thank fans who sent in their questions, and to echo your thoughts before, thank all the families who have engaged in research and pushing clinical trials forward. And finally, thank you, Theresa. It's been wonderful talking with you today and sharing your expertise. And I look forward to our collaboration in this space continuing and that global effort to bring therapies closer for all of our families.
Great. Thank you for having me. Always great to see you and talk to everybody there.
Lovely. All right. Thank you.